Come on, pup. Come on. Wow, damn, it feels good to be outside. Hello, Deb. How are you? Nice to see you. Hey, everybody. What's happening? Happy Thursday. I tell you what, today was a real roller coaster. I was on, I don't know if anybody saw me. I was on a couple different Zionist panels. My God, man. People are ruthless. Shouldn't be surprising, but every time I've tried to give it space and try to come back on their lives just to try to be, gosh, you try to be respectful and you try to be say nice things. I don't even say mean things in the comments. I do issue specific stuff, but no personal attacks. And oh my God, these people. In fact, on one of the lives, they're like, hey, come on up. We promise no personal attacks. And all they were doing is they were trying to get me up there was attacking me personally. So I recorded it, but I'm not sure if I'm going to play it on a video. I don't want to hit the hornet's nest with these people. But damn, they sure do a good job of indicting themselves, don't they? The way they behave, it's just mean, unpleasant, nasty. And that's a broad statement. I'm talking about the people here on Twitter. On TikTok, obviously. But anyway, it is what it is. I should have low expectations. It's just you wonder, what is it that drives that behavior? And here's what I think it is. And this is going to sound like I'm patting myself on the back, and I don't mean it to sound that way. But I think when somebody, whether it's myself or others, can effectively communicate and articulate a clear and concise argument that is persuasive to others, that overcomes the, I guess you'd say, the standard talking points that they send out into the world, you're now somebody they can't stand because obviously you can't be broken. You're sort of an unassailable adversary. Not that I consider myself their adversary, just if you can speak well and you can share information with people, all they can do is try to assassinate your character or call you names or whatever. Some guy told me I was a piece of shit. That another guy said that all I do is show my hate for Jewish people, and I'm a horrible person. I don't care about Palestinians. I'm just doing this for money. Blah 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 blah. And I was also accused today that I've never talked about this issue before I came on TikTok. I've been talking about this thing for over 3 decades. That's a little longer than 6 months. But anyway, it is what it is. So today, what I would really like to do, again, to juxtapose, I said in the comments of this particular panel, all of whom were adding their 2 cents, their very negative 2 cents. I said, no, come on my live. I'll have everybody on the panel except for me be pro-Israel. I have no problem with that. And I will not say a single word. You know how it goes. Anytime somebody comes up, I always ask the audience to be polite and not be mean-spirited. And of course, the other guests as well. Because it's not fair to somebody. If somebody has the courage to come into a live that they're not the majority, they should be given a chance to talk and not be mistreated. I hope that's fair. The golden rule, do unto others, right? But that's not how they operate, of course. And I think if we look at the conflict, it makes perfect sense because the behavior is perfectly congruent with the mindset that has perpetrated these crimes for over 75 years, right? So why should we expect anything different? If you try to defend the indefensible, you're going to be that way because there's just nothing to defend. And I think having a very narrow view of things, like you say, well, they attacked us unprovoked. Give me a break. If I have you in the basement locked up with a key and I'm constantly torturing you, and once in a while you try to throw a shoe at me, and when you do throw a shoe at me, I go, oh my God, how dare you attack me? Dude, you have me in your basement. It's actually my house, and you have me in the basement. That is not unprovoked. That is definitely the definition of provoked, because the circumstances in which the person you're accusing finds themselves is in a disadvantageous position vis-a-vis you, and you caused it to happen that way. So, somebody asked me, well, what's your solution? What's your solution to all this? Well, my solution is that the Israelis have made it impossible or impractical for there to be a solution. We know that Netanyahu has said over and over again that the best way to guarantee there will not be a two-state solution is to divide politically the Palestinians by funding and supporting the H group, which is exactly what they did, and it's worked. And listen, let's give credit where credit's due. You can look at it as disgusting and duplicitous and barbaric as it's been, but it has been effective. And this is part and parcel of the broader view. And as hard as it is for us to see this from a different vantage point, to step back a little bit, but if you step back, let's just say what's happening inside of Gaza and the West Bank in the last 6 months, which is horrific. But if you step back and on Google Earth and you pull back a little bit, you're seeing not only the trees, but the forest, and then of course the township, and then you pull out further. This same sort of slow but steady plan of playing the long and steady game is what's in play. And so, credit where credit's due. If somebody has the ability to sort of, patiently work their thing, they got an objective, and they slowly work it. That's what they're doing. So, unfortunately, we wish it weren't the case, but it seems to be the way it is. So, anyway, by the way, if there is somebody here who is pro-Israeli, if you're somebody who likes to come here and bash me in the comments or whatever, that's fine. But come on up. Come on up and let's talk. And I will give you an adequate chance to speak your mind. I will show you the welcome mat, and I will give you the courtesy that, unfortunately, people like me do not get in return. That's okay. Kill them with kindness, they say, right? That's what's got to be. Somebody says, how am I doing? I've had my struggles lately. And for those of you who don't know, I'm a Gulf War vet. And I'm not seeking sympathy. I'm somebody just asked, so I'm telling you. We were affected by a lot of stuff there, a lot of toxins, and a lot of it's catching up to people, myself included. So it is what it is. I have a hard time in the mornings. It's really hard for me to get up. I don't sleep well, and I feel sick most of the time. But usually about this time of day, I can kind of rally a little bit, which is what I do. So I do what I can with what I got and be thankful for what that is, right? That's really all we can do. And let's face it, my circumstances compared to others in the world are very easy. And as I like to say, I've been to jail 3 times, and I've been in a war zone. And whenever you're not in jail or a war zone, it's a pretty good day, because those circumstances kind of suck. But that's it. I hope you're doing well. User 1001, thank you for asking. I appreciate that. What did I go to jail for? I can't say the words here without being careful. Let's just say Cheech and Chong. Remember Cheech and Chong? For that neighborhood. Nothing what I would call super crazy. Never anything violent, never anything in any other realm. Just, being a creative, entrepreneurial Cheech and Chonger. Let's put it that way. But I don't have anything on my record. My record is clean, and they were just minor stays, like before the court case and stuff. I think my total time behind the proverbial slammer was, let me think, 4.5 one time, 2 the others, about 7.5 days total across 3 instances. And I will tell you this: 5 minutes is too much. If you've never been in a situation like that where you're not allowed out, let's put it that way, just the food alone is punishment enough, if you want to call it that. I wouldn't even call it food. I would call it, I don't know. I don't know what you call it. It was just bad. But I will say this: the thing that surprised me the most, I think a lot of people are afraid of the other people that are there, right? You're worried, oh my God, I've heard all these horrible stories. That was the least of the problem. The people there were really nice. A lot of them were there for, sort of low level stuff. I wasn't in a like a long-term situation. That's called prison. That's a whole different ballgame. But county jails, if you don't know, you don't get many amenities. It's probably the least comfortable part if you're involved in a longer term situation before they transfer you. It's the least pleasant part of the experience because everybody's temporary in and out. Now, we can have a whole other live about that and talk about my past transgressions and unusual experiences. I also used to count cards in Vegas and the Palms Casino. One time I had to hide in the bathroom for 7 hours, a broom closet, so they wouldn't arrest me because I was what's called trespassed. And once you're trespassed from a casino, meaning they catch you counting cards more than once, and they tell you can't come back. And I came back because it was like a really good place. It was an easy place to make money. And of course, then I never could go back because I almost got arrested. So that's just silly stuff. And in fact, the movies where they show people getting beaten up by the mafia, that's long since the past. What happens? It's all corporate now, like Las Vegas Sands and Bally's and places like that. And the worst is these corporate morons come there and they tell you you can't play. That's all. It's called getting backed off. But anyway, no, I'm not a badass. Trust me. The hardest part for me was they have an image of what card counters look like. And I'm like the typical card counter, like sort of like a white dude. Because after about 20, 30 minutes, they kind of catch on. Hey guys, how you doing? Another nice encounter, another rendezvous.
We okay, bud?
I'm trying not to get you on one of TikTok live, so I'm trying to keep just
Okay,
just the
okay.
dogs, just the dogs. Yeah, it's always nice to see passersby with their cool dogs. Anyway, that's for another story. I should. People say I should write a book. I should write a book about some of this stuff. It's been a very weird journey, but yeah, it'll be fun sometime. What I wanted to do was go on other people's podcasts and have people like on my own. Like, we've been doing interviews with Diane Sayre, which I really enjoy. I just don't know. I mean, I know a few of those folks. I know Max Blumenthal, and I've met Jimmy Dore, and I've met Craig Pasta Jardula, who has the Convo Couch with Fiorella Isabel. And I don't know. I just have to reach out to them and see if we can start. I know Lee Camp, if you know Lee Camp. He actually lives near me. We played tennis together a few times. He's a really good tennis player, by the way. He's awesome. Way out of my league. Anyway, so if there's somebody in the audience, and we have about 129 guests, thank you for being here on this Thursday. Please do me a quick favor. If there's someone here who is new and you've never been to one of my lives before, would you please kindly type the number 1 into the chat so I can welcome you, and if necessary, I'll give people a little background because I don't want to waste everybody's time if everybody's already in the know. Hey, Gene, how you doing? Nice to see you. Notice I didn't say hi with your name because that sounds kind of silly, right? Danny, welcome. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you being here. Uh, I really enjoy new users because this is a different style of live that I think that, I try to have my own little thing. Everyone's a little different. Apple user, welcome. 555, yeah. Fadi, how you doing? It's MB Famous or Mr. B Famous. Nice to see you. I'm not sure what you're famous for, but I'd like to learn. Now, just to let you know, don't be shy. How you doing? Is Sleep Over GCF? Welcome. If you're somebody who's never spoken on a live before, it's actually really easy, and I try to make it super simple here. So if you feel like you're intimidated or afraid, just come on up. There's a little red and blue button just right of center at the bottom. And all you have to do is tap that and then request to come up, and we'll have you as a guest. You can talk about whatever you want. So if something's on your mind, just get into it. Just like you're talking to somebody you might bump into at the grocery store or whatever. Same kind of thing. It's always fun to hear different people's points of view. All right, so really quickly, I'll let those who are new know. People who've been here before, thank you for bearing with me. So my name is Chip Barnes, and I'm an Army veteran. I was an officer in the U.S. Army back in the late 80s, early 90s. And as a part of my service, I was in Germany. I was in what's called a tank unit, just like we're seeing in Ukraine and also in Gaza. I will tell you this, for those of you who don't know, war is horrific. You never want to be in a war. Nobody wins, it's horrible. But I was in college right before I got commissioned as an officer, and I learned about the Israel-Palestine conflict just out of pure chance. One of my classmates gave a presentation as a part of our political science class, and she talked about something that happened in 1987. And of course, I graduated in 1989, so this is 2 years prior. There was this event in Palestine called the First Intifada. And Intifada, if you don't know, is an Arabic word for uprising. So obviously the Israelis have always had the upper hand militarily, so of course we know what happened there. But I had no idea. I was completely blown away by the dynamics that I learned because I was like, I didn't know what Gaza was. I didn't know what the West Bank was. I didn't really know much about the 67 war. I thought it was all done by the Arabs, quote unquote. And the idea that I had was we have a friendly country with a protected home for Jewish people, which is the only democracy in the Middle East, and all these crazy countries surrounding them wanted to get rid of all the Jewish people. That was kind of my understanding of it as a young kid. And this kind of just shook all that up. And so ever since then, I've just been, I don't know, there was something about it that made me really upset. And I thought it was terribly unfair what was happening to Palestinians. And it just kind of angered me. I was like, what the, WTF? And so over the years, back when I was younger, all we had were books. So you didn't really have much to work with. A book here and there is all you got. But of course, as the internet came to be, I was able to get much more information. And the more I gathered and the more books I read and the more things I researched, the angrier I got and the more frustration I felt, because it seemed to me that rather than just protecting its own security as it claimed publicly, that Israel was doing all sorts of things that were unnecessary for they were basically subjecting people to unnecessary harm. And I think that's horrible under any circumstances, no matter who's doing it to whom. And so that's kind of driven me. Now, I came onto TikTok. I'm brand new on social media. I was on Twitter for about 18 months before this, but I've since gotten off of there because it's such a negative cesspit. But even with Elon Musk, it's still it's it can be it can bring out the negative. So I just got off Twitter. But I've been on TikTok for 2 days after the conflict started. I was on TikTok. So I'm pretty new to social media. Started making videos, and thankfully people started watching. I was very surprised because, as I've told people, and they don't believe me, but this is the God honest truth, I thought that nobody would want to listen to a single thing I had to say. I really thought that because I follow all these really interesting, talented human beings like Max Blumenthal and Jimmy Dore and Ari Mate and Kim Iverson. And, they're great at what they do. So we're sitting here as like, they're like the celebrities and you're sort of this amateur. And you just wonder if anybody will care. But luckily people did. So I appreciate that so much for those of you. Many people have watched me from the beginning, which is really cool. Thank you if you're a regular follower. I appreciate that. So anyway, so I've been talking to this issue, and I've made a lot of people upset because as an American and somebody who normally wouldn't be someone who's expected to be be very aware of this, I was somebody who had been exposed to a lot of it just out of pure chance and was able to speak to it from an extent where someone had spent time like really learning it from the ground up. And that's threatening to people who have been so successfully using propaganda and misinformation for decades because that has worked for a long time. It worked on me, right? But the really, there's nothing good about what's happened, right? We had a horrible attack on the 7th. To the extent that civilians were harmed, I, of course, condemn that, as I think we all should. I'm sad that the hostages were taken. I'm sad that some of them have been unalived through the conflict. That's all bad. I think we have to have equal humanity when it comes to civilians. And at the same time, the hostages that are sitting in Israeli jails are fair to point out because of things like administrative detention. There's harsh. At the same time, the hostages that are sitting in Israeli jails are fair to, particularly on the fact that I love it. Hey, how you doing? And I enjoy communicating information, and particularly on the fact that I love it. Hey, how you doing? And I enjoy communicating information and sharing that with others because I kind of feel like I have a duty to do that, given the fact that I was lucky enough to learn about it. And it angers me. So I think just talking about it is kind of therapeutic as well. And somebody I was speaking with on the phone today says, you seem so calm when you talk about this. How is it you're not more angry? And I said, I am angry. I've just had to deal with the anger and frustration for such a long time that I don't know. It's like anybody. The example I gave her was somebody who works in the emergency medical services, like shock trauma. And, those people deal with horrific circumstances. You wonder, well, how can they possibly deal with that? It's the same kind of thing. If you see carnage and violence long enough, you get a little bit acclimated to it, unfortunately. I'm going to let the dog off the leash 1 second. Just 1 second. All right, dog, you ready to go? Okay, go play, go play, go play. Come on, go play, go run. She used to go sprinting. I think some dog attacked her a while back, and she's really scared now, which is sad. Okay, here's what I would like to ask of the audience now that I've gone through that whole routine. We have 109 guests. Thank you for being here. But in the past, they used to send my live broadcast out to everybody that was in my group of followers, as well as the For You page, so people could see. They've changed that. So if people don't know my schedule or don't show up proactively, they don't show up. So if you could please be so kind, I'm going to do this too while I ask you to do it. I'm going to hold the screen down for a half a second. The list of my friends will pop up as they will for you. If you could just please invite some people. So let's take a second to do that. I'm going to do that. I see a lot of familiar faces. Thanks for being here, everybody. Yeah, so, and also some people that I'm friends with happen to be pro-Israel. I'm just connected with them in that word. So hopefully they'll come in. Because this is the most fun when we get a diverse set of views, not an echo chamber. Oh, good. Zion might be there. I think a lot of people are having lives right now. That may be why we have such a smaller audience. But if you could please share the live. Yeah, thank you, Fafa. I appreciate that. It doesn't cost anything to do that, and it's nice to have as many people in as possible to hear what I perceive to be the truth, and hopefully you agree. Let's see. Oh, good. Onita's there. I hope Anita comes in. She's somebody who has a lot to say. The frustrating thing I have with dealing with pro-Israel folks is they say they're going to send me videos, which often they do. And I look at every single one out of courtesy and respect for them trying to reach out and share what backs up their point of view. And that's great. Whenever I send them something, crickets. They just ignore it. And they say, well, I don't have time to do that. Well, you think I have all sorts of extra time to look at the 30 minutes of video you sent me? So it's just, again, it gets back to the mindset and the arrogance and the dismissiveness and all that stuff that I find so hard to take. But it is what it is. So, and remember, most people tend to believe what they want to believe, right? And for those of you who are new, just to let you know that the way I try to formulate my positions on things. I'm really not married to any one particular point of view. So if something comes up in terms of evidence or information, you admit it. Hey, I was wrong about this, or this is something that I learned. And think about it, that we're all that way, right? Because if you think back a year ago, many of us now know some things that we just had no clue about, right? A lot of times we don't know what we don't know. And so our beliefs should hopefully be constantly being shaped by new information and things we learn and et cetera. The problem I think that some people have is they just, once they formulate a kind of a take a side, they just try to defend that side no matter what comes up. They just either dismiss it, ignore it, because they want to be able to maintain their belief and not challenge it. And I think that we should all be willing to challenge our beliefs because that's healthy, right? And it shows sort of a willingness to be humble and to be open and to be a critical thinker. And, we'll see. I don't know where this is all going to go, but, if something comes up that does substantiate some of these, I've often said I can't deny, but I can't confirm some of the more egregious allegations that were put on the age group for 10-7. And I've heard now because of this UN article, that it's all proven. It's not proven. If you look at the bottom where they have the citations at the end of the report, it says all information contained in this report and all conclusions are based on Israeli testimony. Now, it could be completely true. I can't say for sure that it's not true. I mean, who knows, right? But somebody saying something is different than us seeing it. And I have seen video evidence of some atrocities, not the more egregious ones. And to that extent, we acknowledge those for what they are, say that's to be condemned. Whoever did that stuff should be punished. And for the same reason that others who do that should be punished. And that's called being fair and down the middle. Of course, anytime you're critical of somebody who is pro-Israel, they think you're being anti-Semitic and unfair. You're taking a side. You're never open-minded, which is how they are. That's projection when somebody accuses you of something like that. So if anybody would like to come into the guest box and share their views, whether you want to share something that's contrary to what I'm sharing, or you want to share something new, or you want to just jump in and talk, feel free to do so. But I really hope we get some more people in because it's always fun to get a broad audience and get a wide variety of views. Now, I hope everybody at this point has seen some of the more recent things that have happened, unfortunately. There was that video floating around that showed the Israeli drone, and there was those 4 unfortunate men that were walking down sort of what appeared to be what was a street that had been amongst a bunch of damage, headed back north. And of course, they were unalived by the drone. And then there's a more recent video that shows 2 individuals, I believe men, that were walking up the beach headed back to the north on the coast. And one of them was waving a white piece of cloth, I guess presumably to let the Israelis know that they were in no harm to them. And of course, boom, boom, both men go down from an Israeli tank. And then they come in with a bulldozer and they bulldoze them into the sand. And this is just, and again, that's what we're seeing. How many things do you think are happening that we're not actually able to see that fall along those lines? And this idea that this military is somehow moral, and in every circumstance, they make the argument that, well, how can we tell who's a bad guy and a good guy? So they just seem to have instructions to just blast anybody. Now, how can you figure out that an infant or an old woman is a threat to your military? I don't know how you can make that conclusion. And yet I've seen many instances where those particular types of people are just boom, boom, like gone. And I don't know how you can justify that. I don't know how you can say that's somehow moral or whatever. We've seen at the Al Shifa Hospital. We've seen doctors lined up and unalived. We've seen people's bodies who were unalived taken by the Israeli military, and presumably they've removed, part of the largest organ on the body, which is our skin, for whatever they want. That's just disgusting. We've seen Israelis turn over Palestinian grave sites because they claim that there's a possibility that some of their people who've been unalived might be under the ground. They just desecrate stuff. Listen, I don't know what's inside of people's heads, but it appears from an outsider looking in that they just don't seem to care. And they seem to have this attitude that no matter what they choose to do, there are no repercussions. They act with complete impunity, and they feel there's never going to be any accountability on any level for their actions. And, you can also point to some of the H group members and say, well, what about that? Yeah, okay, I agree. I've already discussed that. Yes, that is to be condemned. But if you're going to choose to do 50 times
Hello.
what the other group has done, that's a whole other story.
Praise you, brother.
Mohammed, are you there?
Muhammad, yes.
Mohammed, can you pull yourself down? I can't pull you down. I can't pull you down. Can you please disconnect if you don't mind? I need to bring you up through the other guest channel. Can you hear me, Mohammed?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Huh?
Can you please disconnect and come back? Can you please disconnect and then come back through the other guest channel,
No, in the
please?
job.
Okay, yeah, real quick. Can somebody in the comments write please disconnect and come back through the guest comments? Yeah, I don't do battles. That's why I don't want to keep him up. And I can't take him down unless I end the live. It won't let me. I don't know why it does that. It just happened. I don't know. This has happened before. Can somebody in the comments please write, Mohammed, please disconnect? Can somebody please write that if you can hear me?
والله brother
Okay,
عربي
look.
no English.
I know. Look at the comments. Is he going to do it? Please keep writing that. Please disconnect. Please disconnect. Please disconnect.
Okay, bye bye.
Thank you. Okay, for some reason, I can't explain this, but normally if you have a guest, there's a way we can like either keep them or disconnect them, mute them, whatever. When somebody comes up that way, and maybe I hit the wrong button, I can't disconnect them. Only they can disconnect. I don't know why that is. So I'll have to figure that stuff out. I'll have to talk to Eric Warsaw about that. So anyway, yeah, and of course it's tough. We had some people on the live a few days back that only spoke Chinese, and we've had people on the live where they only speak Arabic. It takes a long time for the translation to occur. It's tough. So no offense to you, Mohammed, if you can hear me. Thank you for coming on. It's just that it's hard to do it that way. Anyway, so getting back to today, I don't know if anybody heard earlier, but I tried to be on, or at least in the chat of two different pro-Israel lives, and all they did was basically shit on me, which I'm pretty much used to. And I went into a pro-Palestinian live or a mixed audience, and there was somebody, I don't even know if she was pro-Palestinian or not, but she was just ragging on me hard. She accused, well, I think she was pro-Israel. She accused me of calling to use the word JEW in terms of talking about people in the Biden. I've never used that word. What I have said is there appear to be people in the administration, some of whom have dual citizenship, which they do, many of whom happen to be Jewish, and many are self-professed Zionists. And the question is that of issue? Is it just purely, is it just coincidence? Remember Anthony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, he went to visit Israel in recent weeks, and he arrived there and said, I'm not only here as a representative of the U.S., I'm here, his words, I'm here as a Jew. And somebody said, imagine if a U.S. official who had an Islamic or Muslim background went to a country like Pakistan and said, I'm not only here as a U.S. official, I'm here as a Muslim. Imagine the outrage that would be communicated through the press. How dare you split your loyalty and say, why even say that, right? You're an American official first and foremost. But when it comes to Anthony Blinken, somehow that's appropriate. These are some of the double standards. And if we even talk about it, we get ruthlessly criticized as being anti Semitic. I don't get it. And it seems to be the excuse du jour. There was an Israeli member of the Holocaust to guilt them. And when people from America criticize Israel, we call them anti Semitic. And she said that our lobby has a lot of money and a lot of power. And once someone is labeled that way, they can't come back from it. And that's really the truth. That's really the truth. It's so pervasive in the American political system. Now, I've been on Israeli lives where people claim that AIPAC does not give the most money to politicians. And that's true. There are other interest groups that give far more money, Big Pharma being the number one. But AIPAC doesn't need to give as much money, and here's why. They've created a power dynamic such that no matter what money they give, anybody who steps out of line, who does not support Israeli policies, gets vilified, called bad names, and basically ganged up on, so that when it comes time to be. But the difference is they're going to run between 12 and 14 million, maybe 15 million in some cases, where someone's spending like one sixth or one fifth of that. So unfortunately, many times, most of the time, the person who spends the most money wins the election. So what does that tell you? They use their money and influence to rig and control the political system to their benefit. And then what do we see as an outcome? We see policies where the presidency and their administration, as well as the entire Congress, kiss the ass of the Israel lobby and pursue policies where a ton of money continues to flow to, by the way, by far, Israel gets the most money in foreign aid of any country on earth, times multiples. And are we safer because of that? No, so I'm glad that a small group of people have a big friend who helps them try to avoid harm. There's nothing wrong with that. But the question is, what accompanies that? And what accompanied that with the formation of this smaller friend? Hey, puppy, that's a fair question to ask. But somehow, if you bring it up, oh, you're a bad person. You don't like Jewish people? No, I'm looking at the chessboard and wondering why in the hell does a group of people who make up a fraction of the global population and a small fraction of the US population, why the hell do they get such special consideration? Why? That's a fair question to ask, right? So that's what burns my bridge. I just can't understand why and how that came to be. And so again, maybe somebody has the answer that I can't figure out. But I think the bottom line is it's got to be purposeful. How can it not be purposeful? Now, we talked last night on the live. If you didn't see it, I strongly urge you to go back. Every live that I do is recorded and unedited. So I was accused today, by the way, of constantly spreading misinformation, of constantly saying anti-Semitic things and other racist type things. I invite anybody to go back in my entire library on YouTube or Rumble, which is a competitor to YouTube. I've been posting my lives online since December 19th of 2023, talking about these and other issues. I invite anybody to go back and scour them, use an AI tool. Try to find one example of me behaving that way. You won't find one because it doesn't happen. Because I don't think those thoughts, and therefore I don't speak to those thoughts. But you'd believe, in listening to some of these critics that I have, that that's all I do, that I spend my whole time spreading hate and misinformation. Which, by the way, I mean, what kind of a moron would do that? Just, you're going to get called out for being a liar, right? Hey, from the IDF as an American human. Yeah, I was called not an American and not a human being, by the way. So, hey, Privet, welcome. I wish you had more followers because I would invite you up to speak. I think you have to have 100 or 200, but welcome. And by the way, if Privet, this is just going to show the way to differentiate how somebody does their live broadcasts. We want to be nice to others who disagree. So please don't make disparaging comments towards guests that say things that we disagree with, because that doesn't do any good. It just makes somebody look like a jackass. It's guests that say things that we disagree with, because that doesn't do any good. It just makes somebody look like a jackass. We talked a little live. This is going back maybe a week ago. And he made me think about some of the precursors to the 1967 war, which, I hadn't given more thought to. I thought that was good to give thought to. I still don't agree that they justified the preemptive invasion, but they were, not illegitimate arguments. And that's what I think we should be doing, is sharing information so we can learn from each other. Somebody said, "What are you doing?" She's having a great time, all sorts of dogs at her. I just want to be careful not to get anybody else on film. Yeah, sometimes you got to tap the screen. So, we don't always have to talk about this. We can talk about, I made a video recently about the attacks that took place inside of Moscow, inside of Russia, on the outskirts of Moscow. For those who don't know, you probably heard, but just in case, there was a T attack on a concert in some sort of music hall on the outskirts of Moscow in Russia, and 140 people, the number keeps climbing as people go to the hospital and don't survive. But as of right now, it's like 140 people were unalived and about 100 injured. And the Russian, equivalent of the U.S. FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, they have determined, for whatever reason, through their investigation, that we were told initially it was ISIS, which is a common thing for the U.S. to just blame something on some, not some group that people are aware of. And blame Muslims, right? That's all we ever hear. Blame the Muslims, the extremists. It's always their fault. But it turns out the Russians have clearly said that they believe they believe that without a doubt that it was engineered by the US, the UK, and it was perpetrated by Ukraine. And that's a big deal, because think about it. I mean, the US is always railing against the T word, right? Oh, we have to stop the war on T word, the war. And the US is thick in the mix of actually promoting. And this isn't the first time, obviously. In Syria, if you study the Syria conflict, you're going to see myriad examples of the U.S. funding and supporting all sorts of radicals that are all vying for power. Richard Medhurst calls it 50 flavors of jihad, which I think is pretty cool. But this is something that's not new to the U.S. In fact, I was on the phone with somebody today, like I talked to you earlier about, and she was saying that she's waking up to all these things that are happening in the Middle East. And I said, well, that's just the beginning for the wake-up call. If you really start to dig, read people like Michael Parenti, if you haven't read his stuff, or John Perkins, you're going to find out that the U.S. has had its hands in this type of behavior for a long, long time. And I'm not just talking about like in the modern era, post-World War II. I'm talking about going way back. Look at any of our long-term conflicts and what the U.S. has done, going back to the founding of the country. And it's not good. In fact, everybody wants to think their country are the good guys, right? We're the good guys. We're for democracy and freedom. Unfortunately, the more you learn, the more you figure out that story is not true. If you have a moral compass that's down the middle, you're not just taking sides. And people who love America, hey, rightly so. If you're a patriot, good for you. And if you're using the assessment saying something to the effect that, hey, America is still the greatest country despite its flaws, you can make that argument. But if you're on the receiving end of American foreign policy in Vietnam in 1966, and your whole village is burned down because soldiers are frustrated that the North Vietnamese are running through tunnels, that proclamation doesn't feel so good. If you're somebody from the Mossadegh government in 1953 in Iran, where they had nationalized their oil, and it pretty much kicked the British aside, the U.S. orchestrated a coup and put in this guy, Pervez Musharraf, this guy, the Shah of Iran. And the U.S. claimed that he was this great guy. He killed thousands of Iranians, thousands. Anybody who pretty much got out of line, he just, boom. He was very Saddam-like with a nice suit on. So listen, yeah, leave it to me to lose my dog while I'm doing a live at the dog park. Okay, I may have to kind of do some more yelling on this. And if I can't find her, I may have to stop the live to find her because she's really dumb when it comes to traffic. All right, I'm going to yell one more time. Excuse me. I may have to end this because I got to chase her. You see her? I may have to end this because I got to chase her. You see her? That's not her. What'd you say? There she is right there. You crazy dog. Come here. Okay, enough of the panic. Sorry about that, everybody. Yeah, that sinking feeling. It's losing your cell phone is a similar feeling. Like in your gut, you're like, oh my God, did I leave it at the store? But a loved animal is even more of a gut punch. So there she is. Where did you go, darn it? Where'd you go? Huh? Where'd you go? Where'd you go? There you go. Such a good girl. Yep, good news. So again, getting back to the Americans. So if you're somebody who's not familiar with American history, there's a great book written by a guy named Howard Zinn. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. It's called The People's History of the United States. I strongly recommend people read that. And if you haven't read any of Michael Parenti's books, read his work. And if you're not subscribed to Eddie's channel, Midwestern Marks, I also strongly recommend his page here on Twitter, on TikTok. He is incredible. He has some stuff on North Korea that is just phenomenal. Stuff that'll blow your mind. And yeah, probably chasing squirrels. You know, if you this is what I've come to realize, and hope if you start to do this research, you realize that the same narratives that the Zionists and the Israelis use to kind of cover up their game plan in Gaza and in the West Bank is the same exact methodology the U.S. uses on its citizens. I like to put it this way, and I'm sure many of you have heard this story, so if you have, I apologize. But the way that propaganda works, it's most effective when it's pervasive but subtle, and it almost becomes invisible. I'll give you the best example that I can. So, have you ever been to somebody's house who's older, maybe your grandparents or a friend's grandparents, and you walk in the door, and the first thing you smell is sort of this unique sort of old person smell. And I'm getting older too, so that's probably going to happen to me soon. God forbid. But it's noticeable, right? But your grandparents lived there all the time. If you were to go up to your grandma or grandpa or whomever it is, Mr. Johnson, and say, "Hey, what? If you don't mind me asking, I don't mean any disrespect. What is that smell?" And they would say, "What smell?" And if you ask somebody off the street, "Tell me about what American propaganda, what goes on? How are we? What do you mean, what propaganda? That doesn't happen here. That's somewhere else. That's North Korea. That's China, right?" That is a great example of propaganda. So I would make the argument that most Americans, unfortunately, live in that old person's house, or most Westerners for that matter. And therefore, they just don't see it. It's like a fish in water. They wouldn't even, what's water, right? You're in it. You're so immersed in it from birth. And basically, this is how it goes. You're Pledge of Allegiance. You're taught to consume, go to school, get ready to work, go to college, or maybe just go directly to work your 40, 50 years, retire, and die. And what does that serve? It serves the interest of capital as in terms of labor. And you're sort of lied to about the way your country fits into the world. You're for freedom and democracy, and you have this great democracy that's supposed to function where you can vote for your leaders. It's a representative, and it doesn't work that way. That's the theory, but in practice, it's completely different. And that's why we've seen such a disparity of wealth, because different things have been structured in such a way that the oligarchy, the people that have all the money at the top, most of the wealth in this country is owned by a very small fraction of the people, and even internationally, it's even worse in some cases. And the way it happens is they centralize commerce so that the available places to do business for people like you and I is limited. And usually it's centralized, meaning chain stores. And most chain stores are what's called publicly traded, meaning that people can own shares. And who owns the shares? The richest people in the world, right? And therefore, they take advantage of things like affecting the tax laws. They affect the tax code to their benefit. They take advantage of different crises around the world to draw funds out of treasuries or to use the militaries of certain countries to their benefit for their industry. For example, the oil industry, the pharmaceutical industry during pandemics, whatever you want to say. And therefore, tons of money transfer from the public to the top. And the debt is left to the taxpayers. The vast majority of the population is the ones who pays taxes, not at the bottom, of course, but the middle and somewhat middle class. But the liability for all the taxes on the credit card, the treasury that we have to pay these bills back at some point, at least the interest, that gets stuck with the people. So that's the situation in the United States. We have a vast disparity of wealth. And listen, life isn't horrible here. We have some things that the poorest people in other countries don't have. Our poorest people have a standard of living here that's have amenities that the greatest kings and queens didn't have, 500 years ago. Running water, electricity, sewage, that kind of stuff. It's just a whole different ballgame. But the average net worth of somebody who's in the lower economic class is like maybe, negative $500 or $500. And the people at the top have net worths of 20, 30, 50, 100 million on up. And that's pretty crazy. And I think that needs to change. And I think that can change, but that change is going to be very difficult to affect. And a lot of people, again, will say, well, hey, genius, you pointed out the problems. What's the solution? Well, listen, it's simple to say things. I'll give you an example. If you're somebody who has, like many of us do, let's say you've gained a lot of weight over the course of 30 years. You've gained, let's say 50 pounds or whatever it is. It's easy to say lose weight, right? That's a simple proclamation to make, but doing it is the hard part. It's just like I would say to the extent of changing the country, it's easy to say, well, just go get organized and block the system until the powerful give way. But it's hard to do. It's very difficult to organize people. People are afraid. They're struggling. They don't have time to do even stuff like this, much less, have time to think about some grand change, right? Is there a book you can recommend on this trip? This is such a fascinating topic. Yeah, I'll repeat some of those. if you didn't hear them before. And by the way, just for those of you who want to come back and hear this, if you forget the names or something and you want to review it, this is being recorded. It will be posted on my YouTube and my Rumble channels sometime within 30 minutes of it being finished. Yeah, okay, so some books. All the great books about U.S. operations around the world. There's one by Chalmers Johnson called Blowback, which is describing why we get hit in the United States based on its policies. There's a great author named Michael Parenti. He's older now, but Parenti, Michael Parenti. I really recommend his work. There's also, I'm sure we've heard of Noam Chomsky, right? He has a lot of great books. You can read his work. If you're curious how the U.S. and its international cabal uses the banking system and the monetary system to leverage nation states to get money for the oligarchs, you can read John Perkins' Confession of an Economic Hitman. And that tells you how the World Bank and the IMF sort of do their dirty work and end up putting countries in difficult circumstances such that their resources can then be taken from them and privatized, like water systems, power plants, etc., because the country can't pay its debts back. They usually have a leader that comes in and accumulates the debt. The money that's accumulated goes to the private Western contractors to build the infrastructure, whatever it may be. So the money flows out of their country. The debt stays in the country. And then a new leader will come in having to deal with that debt. And then, of course, they can't pay it. And then what they call structural adjustments happen, which is a fancy word for we're taking your good shit. So that's that. So yeah, there are a lot of great books on that. You can read Howard Zinn's The People's History of the United States. Somebody named Erica Girls keeps saying, or Erica Girl keeps saying the live is freezing badly for her. Is it freezing badly for everybody? I have 2 bars of signal, which is better than usual down here. Somebody says, all live streams are lagging. It's a TikTok issue. Okay, that could be the case. But yeah, sometimes when I'm down here at the park, it does this. So, it's unfortunate because I think all of us would like to be able to grab the pom-poms and say great things about our particular country. And I'll probably poll the audience first. But I think it's a great documentary and it's a great primer. It's not even that complete. It needs to be updated because the Israelis, believe it or not, have added to their arsenal of oppression. But if you watch that, you're going to be like, oh my God, how do these people deal with their day-to-day life with all the stuff that the Israelis throw at them? It's really bad. It's really bad. Somebody says, who do you recommend on Asia? Well, that's going to Hublai Khan. I can recommend somebody on YouTube who I'm very fond of. His name is Brian Berletic, Berletic. He's based in Thailand. Tzer, Anna Balzer, Life in Occupied Palestine. It'll take you right to the video. I should put a link on my link tree to that video. I should add a lot of stuff to my link tree. Okay, so when I say my link tree, what I mean is in my bio, if you go to the page where all my videos are, in there you'll see a link. It says link tree with my name, Chip Barnes. And if you click on that, we talked about YouTube and Rumble where this is going to be uploaded. You'll find those social media links in that link tree. Now, unfortunately, if you're outside the US and you're watching this, the clickable version of that link tree link is not present in the bio. So you have to go into my bio and just type the stuff that I put in there into your web browser. I hate having to do this, as do I. But if you're somebody who likes the way that I do stuff and you want to help out, I'm not doing this, quote, for money. But I'm like anybody else here. If you're independent and you don't love it, I do this because I love it, not so much for money. But got to pay the bills. Rent is due at the beginning of the month, as you know. So anyway, I don't want to. I'm probably going to get on again tonight for a little bit. It's 6:45. I'm going to go home and grab some dinner, feed the dog and the cats. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back on after that, probably around 8 o'clock for another couple hours. Okay, because I know the signal isn't great down here. We'll get some more people too, because a lot of people do lives this time of day. Okay, again, it's recorded, so if you miss part of it, you want to get the names of those books, documentaries. Let me share one more with you that's specific to Gaza, because that's on our minds, of course. A journalist by the name of Abby Martin, who is, by the way, is spectacular. She's somebody for whom I have a lot of respect. She made a documentary a few years back called Gaza Fights for Freedom. Gaza Fights for Freedom. So again, all free to watch on YouTube. And then check it out. Another good one, just so you know, on the media stuff, we talked about propaganda. This is on the American front by the Israeli lobby. It's called the occupation of the American mind.